Morning, colleagues from across UCD. Welcome to the 2021 October event from Work Smarter Together. In the spirit of these events, we usually alternate between a focus purely on internal and other events we bring in external. October is the time when we typically bring in visitors, and so we have an interesting and exciting lineup this morning with Ciara Garvan joining us from WorkJuggle, and with the Innovation Academy hosting two interesting people from outside UCD, as well as our own colleagues from IT services joining us for for further information and insight into what we're doing around the digital office and hybrid working. It's all focused on hybrid working. We have three different segments because of the variety that goes into it, and so hopefully across the three of those you'll find stuff that you find interesting. But before we get into the detail, can I invite Mark Rogers to open the session with a few words? Mark has been a great supporter and indeed one of the instigators or prompts behind Work Smarter Together since it began in 2014. So it's always great to have Mark's support at these events. So Mark, over to you for your intro.
Thanks very much, Michael, and again, welcome to everybody to this event. Delighted to see so many coming in on Zoom. The focus today, obviously, on hybrid working is particularly topical as we now see that the higher than expected numbers of COVID cases mean that the full relaxation of the rules is going to be delayed for another little while, but really delighted to see the continuing interest in Work Smarter Together and the broader agenda about sort of agility, working together to really develop and improve the life and work on the campus. I am, as Michael has said, a firm supporter and believer in the notion that really working together as a group means that we will get much more done. It'll be much more enjoyable to do it, and we'll benefit from the sort of innovation and in reality the deeper understanding of people in the jobs that they do to really help make life better for ourselves, but also in terms of delivering for the university in terms of the teaching of students and the research and scholarship that we do. I think hybrid working existed before COVID, but probably very few of us were engaged with it or even had really thought about it very much. But the pandemic has certainly brought the focus very much into it. And I think, of course, we have to remember that we're actually coming from a position of remote working into the notion of hybrid working. And so we're not starting from where you might naturally have expected us to have started. I think the other thing I'd say in UCD, we've not prejudged this issue. We've not made a determination of how hybrid working will work, and we've actually been very relaxed in thinking about and exploring the full range of ways in which hybrid working might operate. And that's very appropriate given the very sort of diverse range of roles that people have, and it is definitely not a one-size-fits-all. And so we've committed, in a sense, to continue with a kind of a fairly loose framework of exploring how hybrid working will work in the university effectively through until May next year, where we will take the learnings from all of the different ways in which that is happening on the campus and try and find a way forward that works to the benefit both to the university but also to everybody in it. And I think that we need to recognize that can be a challenge, because don't forget that we very much pushed the university down a road that says one of our unique selling points for our students is that we are a campus-based educational institution, and that means a lot of the educational experience that students will get is through the peer-to-peer interaction, through the faculty-student interaction, and through the interactions that they have with all the people on the campus in the wide ways in which that happens. And that is a core part of what we do. So while there are real opportunities in hybrid working, we also have to recognize that there are risks around it, and hopefully today that full spectrum will be a little bit explored in terms of thinking about our way forward and how we will really be able to deliver something that works in the interests of the university, but also in the interests of everyone in the university. And I don't think, and we should not assume, that those are mutually exclusive, that this isn't about one or the other. It is about finding the balance that works for everybody. So I am looking forward to this workshop, and I'm really looking forward in the coming months to see the outcome of what is a sort of a very big experiment that we're doing across the university in terms of exploring what hybrid working means for us as an institution. And so with that, I'll hand back to Michael and hopefully participate for at least a good part of this workshop.
Great. Thank you very much, Mark. Just to let people know some of the housekeeping around the session's being recorded, but it's only in speaker view, so no participants are being recorded. We'll take questions in the chat channel in Zoom, and they'll be picked up. And if we've time at the end of each slot, we'll get to those questions in the slot, or what we will do is follow up with them afterwards. And we've also got the Google Currents channel that's associated with Work Smarter Together that we can follow up on as well. So there's a few of those things. You can use chat in Zoom, and you can use Google Currents afterwards, and we'll follow up on anything that comes up. We have 3 segments. Ciara Garvan from WorkJuggle, and Ciara will be with us for a session through to 25 to 12. Our colleagues from IT Services till 12 o'clock, and then Alan Morgan from the UCD Innovation Academy will come in at 12 o'clock till 12:30, and we'll be finished at that point. So just to say, to welcome Ciara to the first segment. Ciara is this person we met through our colleagues in the alumni relations team. We were looking for somebody good we could bring in who could talk interestingly around the whole hybrid working space, and Ciara is going to talk to us about hybrid working and inclusivity. Ciara is the founder of WorkJuggle. It's an online platform for connecting highly skilled professionals with companies that are looking for those skills on a flexible basis. And needless to say, that kind of flexibility and that changing shape of how people connect with work has been a big factor in the last 18 months. They also consult on inclusive workspaces and on things like unconscious bias training. So with that as a very top level background, and just to point out, Ciara's company was flagged as one of the top 30 startups back in 28 by Silicon Republic. It's my great pleasure to invite Ciara to give us the opportunity to listen and learn from her thinking and from her interesting insights. So Ciara, over to you.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate that. It's lovely all to be here with all of you today. And just to reiterate on what Mark and Michael were saying, I want this to be as interactive as possible. Feel free to use the chat and I'll come through it as I'm going through the presentation. If I can answer the questions that I go through, I will. So just to introduce myself a little bit, I am a graduate of UCD, and if any of my old lecturers are on the call, I'd like to apologise now. I did not cover myself in any academic glory whatsoever. I did a BCom International with Italian, and I graduated in '96, but I have to say they were absolutely some of the best years of my life, and I love UCD. Since then, I've gone on to do an MSc in Applied Computing in Bolton Street, and I'm currently studying to do an MA in Creative Writing in DCU, so I like to get around both the faculties and the universities. As the Innovation Academy are on today, I really have to give a shout out to them, because 8 years ago, I did the Innovation Academy myself in UCD, and they were the first people I ever told about my idea for WorkJuggle. And they were absolutely the first people who ever thought it wasn't a terrible idea. And I loved being in that supportive network ecosystem. I think it's a really powerful way to kind of instigate change, both personally and professionally. And I'm delighted to see them on the call today. So I'm going to move into my presentation, and what I'm going to talk about today is how to manage a hybrid workforce inclusively. Okay, so hybrid working is new. We really haven't had it before. We've had fully distributed teams, and my own team, WorkJuggle, we've always been a fully distributed team. We've never had an office. We've always worked from home and come together. So there's no center Hybrid working is different. Hybrid working is when there is a center and there's people in that center, and then there's people remote and people outside of that center. Okay, so we're in this period of testing and learning, and I think it's really interesting. I'm sure I wasn't the only person to log on to the Irish Times today and see that the plans for return to work, they've all changed. We're all adapting rapidly, and we're all having to test and learn. And I think it's very interesting. You're going to come back in May, have a look at what's worked. I think that's really important. Okay, so because hybrid working is new, I do think there's an opportunity to create a new reality. And in a way, this is a new playing field for you as an organization. There is nobody out doing this better than you at the moment. I would say that. We are all learning as we go. Because sometimes people can look at, the Googles and the Facebooks, and they can think, oh, it's all happening in there. They know what they're doing. Really, what I'm saying today is you have an opportunity now to shape your organization in a new way, in a way which is powerful for you. Now, can I just check you can see my slides?
Not yet, Ciara, no.
Oh, you're not seeing my slides. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sharing slides and nobody's. Okay, I'm glad I checked. Let me do that now. Can you see them now?
Yes, indeed.
Super. And can you see me as well?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Okay, so so I suppose over the last 18 months, we've all shown an incredible amount of resilience. We've learned a huge amount, and I think it's time sometimes, we forget how much we've learned in the past 18 months. We've gotten rid of the old, we've gotten rid of those long commutes on the M50, we've gotten rid of maybe endless meetings. So there's been positives coming out of it. But one thing I would really say is the pandemic is not a true reflection. What we've had over the last 18 months is pandemic working. It's not flexible working, and it's not remote working. And an example I always think of is my brother-in-law heads up a small team in a bank. Of his team of 4, 2 of them, their wives are pharmacists, so they were gone all day, and they had children under the age of 10, and the creches were closed. That's crisis management. That's pandemic working. It's not flexible working, and it's not remote working. And now we have an opportunity as we come out of that to say, okay, what's our better way of working? And Josephine, would you be so kind as to run a poll for me? Because I'm really interested to see here on this call today, we've got 118 people on the call today. How many people before the pandemic had worked flexibly?
Great. Can you see? Oh, no, you can't see it yet. I'll just launch that, Ciara. Sorry.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to see here, and when I say flexibly, and sometimes it's good to give definitions, flexibly is having some autonomy over your working hours. So it's maybe it's working a 4-day week, maybe it's being able to drop children to school before you start working. It is having that level of autonomy that can be quite important to people and how they feel about their career and their career progression. So that's interesting. So no, so these are really high numbers of no. So it's looking like, oh, it's looking like 73% no, had never worked flexibly before. Now I'm going to end that poll and I'm going to share the results so you can all see it for yourselves. So you had to get in there fast. Okay. So that's so this has been a huge learning experience for people. So now I'm going to run the second. Does flexi count? Yeah, I do think flexi counts. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing this. I'm going to run my second poll, which is prior to this, how many people had worked remotely? I'm just going to launch that there. So again, the numbers here look really high, actually. And remotely is a bit easier to define, but it's that working, not working in the office. Okay, so I'm going to give it one more second. Nearly everyone? Yep, here we go. Okay, and I'm going to share these now. So 77% of people had not worked remotely before. That's a huge amount of learning for people over the last period of time to now be working remotely, to be working autonomously. And I'm going to go back now to my slides. So it's been a huge learning experience for all of us. And I think there is the opportunity for us to come out of this with a better way of working, but there will be challenges with that. And I'm going to talk about some of those challenges now. So what are the potential challenges? So language language really matters. So remote sets up the expectation that some people are essential and that potentially some people are not. There's the issue of visibility. Who is visible? So if we have two different working environments, who is in the office and who's out of the office? And I'm going to talk about some of the challenges there. And from an inclusion perspective, that creates challenges as well. So we have something we call proximity bias. You know, we see the people who are right beside us, we possibly regard them as higher, as we see the work we're doing. If somebody's working remotely for a long period of time and we don't have visibility to them, there's a real danger that in a couple of years' time, who's going to get the promotion? Is it going to be the person who's been working beside you in the office, or is it the person who's going to be remotely? And that's some of the things we really need to consider as we go down a hybrid working path. Another issue here is inclusion, and I'm going to tie that into individual circumstance. So Michael mentioned we have a recruitment side of our business, and one of the things we have seen going forward is that for a lot of women, they are looking more for the remote working, and I absolutely support that. But the problem is, if the office is not reflective of the society, if we have a situation in which there are a lot more women working from home, we will lose that diversity of thought inside in an office space. So how are we going to manage these two work environments? And it's a real concern. And I think one of the interesting things about the pandemic is it's all been happening so fast. The research is just catching up. You know, the research is there now to show that women's careers suffered during the pandemic, that they were often considered the default parent or the default carer. Now, anecdotally, I can share that, yes, we see this coming across in terms of jobs, in terms of who's choosing to work remotely, who's choosing to work flexibly, and we would absolutely have concerns about what will this mean for career progression going forward. And that comes down to individual circumstance. So these are some of the challenges. And one of the real challenges is trust. We were asked to come into a company there the other day. The senior management team were really frustrated with their owner. The senior management team said, we have never been so productive. We have sprints. We have, on every level, we have never been as successful as we are today. And we all want to remain working remotely. But the person who owns the company just doesn't trust the team to do that. And that's a really difficult situation to be in, because for whatever reason, psychologically, he's in command and control, and he needs to feel like he needs to see everybody, he needs to control everybody, and now he knows they're working, even though it's very clear that they have been more productive than ever. So this issue of trust, and that I am trusting you to do the job, that your job is not, you know, the job is the hours you work and not a place you go. That's going to be very difficult for some people, and it's not altogether rational. So I was just looking there to see was there anything in the chat. So Simon Senek says music happens between the notes. So how does trust happen now? You know, it's people's hearts and minds, it's feeling connected, and it's realizing that sometimes we're going to have to compromise as well. Whilst we have more autonomy, we will also have to compromise, and that degree of flexibility that people are able to offer will be really important as we move forward. And that those micro moments of connection, we've already missed them. People being in an office, having the chat, having a cup of coffee, they've been really missed. And the other one that's very important is that psychological safety. I feel safe to say, I'm not going to be able to finish that report. I'm going to have to do it next week. Or I don't feel comfortable with the way this process is going. Or I need more It's being able to say things that you think may be uncomfortable. That whole piece around psychological safety. So we say the future of work is hybrid. So the last 18 months, we've proven work is not bound to an office or a time. There has been a strong business case for greater flexibility in how we work. And we've started a collective conversation, like we've been part of this incredible global experiment, which has happened overnight. And we are now talking about what is work, where does it happen, how do we measure it, and what's going to come back. And the challenge is to take the really good parts of this whole, remote working that we've been doing and blend it into our new way of working. So I'm interested to know, so if people have worked flexibly before, what has been your experience? And if you'll put that into the chat, I'd be interested to see that. So one of the challenges I'm going to talk about here is the threat to fairness, okay? there are power differentials. If we have one group inside and another group outside, there's going to be power differentials. And how do we have access to resources? How do we have access to those important resources? And in, certain companies like Dropbox, they're saying digital first. Everything now has to be digital. This whole digital transformation piece is part of, I think, the next big conversation that we'll be having in Ireland, but that we're all able to access the same systems at the same time. And then visibility. Who is visible? And we do this course on hybrid working. And one of the really parts of the course that's become quite big is piece around self-advocacy. People have to advocate for themselves more now in this changing, challenging environment than maybe they did have to do that previously. And for some people, that's very uncomfortable. But we have to be thinking the whole time, when I'm not in the room, what are people saying about me and who's putting me forward for the next position? Okay. And then we need to think about the language that we're using. Oh yeah, sorry, I'm loving some of these chats actually. Okay, I'm going to come back to them in one sec. Okay, and then the language used. Always very interesting language around remote working and working from home, and who is important, who's part of the core. And we all have different variables. A lot of people, and I would absolutely include myself in that, we get social and emotional support from work. This is like an important part of our mental health, is working with people. And I think that's one of the things, I personally have really missed, that meeting people for coffee, having the chats, having things that are spontaneous, that you just don't get on Zoom. So how do we replicate that? And that whole piece around informal networking. I know one of the big tech companies, they found it very difficult because work was such a huge part of people's lives. People have been spending very long times. And what they ended up doing was finding out, they were all kind of living in Silicon Docks, finding out who's living close to each other and let them go meet for coffee outside, even if they don't work together, even if they're not on the same team, just so they can meet people, because sometimes they wouldn't necessarily have a huge network outside of work. That's kind of really creative, and they're the things we need to be thinking about. We also need to be conscious of people have different home life situations. And I would be very clear that, and again, this is something that's just come up now in the last couple of months when we're talking to companies, some people want to work in the office 5 days a week. And that should be absolutely fine as well. We shouldn't judge that either. To work from home, to work in the office 5 days a week, that really works for some people. And we have to remember another variable is the quality of the setup. Some people have very different quality setups. Some people, and we've all heard the stories, people working out of their car, people working in shared homes, everybody on the broadband at the same time. We have to allow for people to have these different quality setups. Now, I'm just going to go to the chat very quickly because there was some interesting stuff in there. How do we manage so the hours people work don't grow when working at home relate to the individual having confidence around expectations? That's a really good question. And I think, I'm going to talk a little bit about boundaries and why they're important, and also the tech work home life blur. And Michael, I know you're saying getting quiet time for thinking space at home. That's really important. And I have to say, one of my favorite books, and which I would really recommend to everyone here, is Deep Work by Cal Newport. And he talks about the importance of that deep work. So I'm going to talk about how do we think about work now. And so this is really, what I'm doing is I'm challenging you with a question. There are no easy answers in a lot of this, but how can you offer remote work with enough organizational support so that I can be as successful as the people who work in the office? And then we need to be asking ourselves, what do you need to understand about me and my individual circumstances? And again, that's one of the things that's come out of the pandemic. We're all know a lot more about each other's personal circumstances in a way we never had to before. And then again, that piece on self-advocacy. How am I advocating for myself in this new environment? And again, and we never thought we'd ever see this, but we're talking to companies who have onboarded and let a person go within an 18-month period without ever having met that person in person. Like, we would never have thought that possible previously. And I'm just going to look at that chat there very quickly. Working long hours, yes. And I think that's so true. Living alone, no reminders to take a break or finished up. And I think the discipline about that and the routine. So I'm going to talk about that. I think that comes up later, but there is a thing called the fake commute, you know, and people talk about that as well. Whether you go for a walk at the start of the day, walk at the end of the day, or you just have a little ritual that you give yourself a fake commute. And I think that's a clever thing to do. So how can we bring together everything you loved pre-pandemic? And for me, you know, that's like the buzz, the energy, people being together with all we've learned during the pandemic to design a better work experience. And I'd be really interested to know, what did people enjoy about that period during the pandemic? And it's fine, some people didn't enjoy anything, but a lot of people, like I met a woman the other day, she's walking her dog in the park, it was 5 o'clock, and she's saying, oh, this is all going to go next week. I have to go back into the office 5 days a week. You know, how can we design a workplace whereby we can do simple things like that and still be successful, you know? So yeah, so if you want to put in the chat, what did you enjoy potentially over the last 18 months of work? Because I think there have been good parts of it. And for me, I absolutely did not miss the M50. Okay. And so there's the piece around the office, there's the new norms. We need to think about, yeah, not having the commute. I think that's a massive one, isn't it? And now the M50 is crazy again. Morning walk, longer sleep, love it. Seeing the family more, having my pets around. Yeah, we got a lockdown puppy as well. I think a lot of people got lockdown puppies. Option to work from outside Dublin. That's a big one. You know, I don't know if anyone else got that program in the West, living in the West. Uninterrupted time. I think that's really important. And I would go back to that book by Cal Newport, Deep Work. Sandyman Strand in the morning. That sounds absolutely gorgeous. So I am going to keep a little eye on time. And so let's talk about inclusion, unconscious bias, and hybrid. Our challenge will be, how do we create an inclusive, egalitarian, blended environment? And there are no easy answers to this, okay? But I think we need to talk about it, and I think we need to plan for it. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And I was speaking to a customer of ours the other day, big insurance company, and their plan was everybody could do whatever they liked. And I know where they're coming from with that, because I think they're doing it from a good place where they're saying, look, we'll just let people do what they like. But I would have concerns about how that would work. And again, it comes back to visibility, promotion, access to resources, and as well, sometimes you need a little bit of structure. One of the things that I see working quite well in companies is it's a meeting-free day. So there is one day a week where there are no meetings, and I know people are saying in that chat about it being productive, a meeting-free day can be incredibly productive, but the whole company has to be having a meeting-free day at that time, because then it becomes the culture. And the senior managers absolutely have to be doing it as well, because if they're seen to not adhere to it, then everybody else will ape that behavior as well. Another thing I see, and I think it's quite nice, is increasingly I'm seeing people at the end of their email signatures. You know, I am sending this email out of towers at a time which suits me. It may not suit you. Please respond when you can and don't feel under pressure. Like, increasingly, I never saw that before the pandemic. I'm increasingly seeing it now. The one thing I would say, and I know people are talking about the blend in the chat, the one thing I would say is, personally, I often work at the weekend, but I schedule everything to go out on a Monday morning. So, and I do think that's actually better, because if people see an email, they often do. Oh, you have a meeting-free day on a Friday. Brilliant. That's great. And you know what? I was talking to Dell yesterday, and we were showing them a training program we have, and with Friday afternoons off, and they were like, yeah, to be honest with you, we always do very little on a Friday, so that's fine. You know, I think that's really, the pace of work is such that that's becoming increasingly common. So yeah, hybrid, remote bias, proximity bias. I've spoken about this, the in-group and the out-group. We need to be really careful about all of this. And a light meeting week once a month. That sounds really cool. And a really good idea, because meetings can be, you know, so time consuming. And quiet Fridays. So now I'm just going to put this down. I just need to grab my slides. So So I suppose the question, and what I am doing today is posing questions, how can you normalize flexible working while building equitable access to career advancement opportunities? There are not easy answers to this, but you need to be thinking about this as we move into the next 18 months. So language is powerful. And I always laugh, you know, there's remote working and there's working from home, and really what is the difference, you know? I always think working from home sounds like you're popping a chicken in the oven, and remote working sounds like you're really cool and you're working off a beach in the Caribbean. Okay, they're the exact same thing, but we need to be careful about our language, and also that whole piece around virtual first, you know, I think that's going to be really important going forward. Okay, so an interesting quote there from Harvard Business Review. And I think this is really important. So unless companies learn to evaluate output, rewarding people for what they actually contribute rather than the show they put on, a world of mostly remote work may increase an organization's bias for rewarding those who are present, potentially disproportionately harming women. Okay. So what are the skills we need to succeed? And if you can think of other skills, please put them in the chat and I'd be interested to see them. Really strong communication skills. How are we communicating? Relationship building skills. Again, we're working with people who are onboarding into large organizations where they have never met anybody personally. How are they going to build those relationships? Adaptability, resilience, networking skills, yeah, change management, 100%. And then feedback. Being able to be comfortable to say, this is working for me, this isn't working for me. And I also agree about leadership, what leadership are saying, you know, or rather not what they're saying, what they're doing, because sometimes there can be a difference. So yeah, this is mentioned in the chat. How are we intentional and deliberate? How can the technology support me in what I want to do rather than pulling me in 15 different directions? And again, you know, I see the creep of WhatsApp. People now WhatsApping each other all the time, and we weren't doing that before the pandemic. You know, it's a dilemma. How do we unplug? So I'm just going to have a quick, I'm kind of conscious about time, and that piece around switching off. Okay, that deep work piece, not being always on and then resting. But what I want to finish up talking about today is a high performing team. And what are the best predictors of productivity? Our team's energy and engagement outside formal meetings. So anybody can roll up to a meeting, put their feet underneath the desk and just show up, right? But what's happening outside, and what's people's energy like, and what's people's engagement like? And social time is deeply critical to team performance. So we now need to think of new ways to introduce that social time and be together, being very conscious that people have different levels of anxiety. And again, that's one of the things that's been a real learning coming out of this. People are so, you know, some of my team are incredibly anxious. And I have some people on my team who are really relaxed and trying to get a team meeting with everyone together and people doing it happy. And, you know, everybody wearing masks, and it is a challenge, you know, so, but that social time is really important. So I'm going to finish up today by talking about joy. So joy is a secret to great teams, okay? It means harmony. It means teams that are in sync. It is impact, where the success is collective. It's on everybody. And acknowledgement. So shared success and contribution. And I suppose when we talk about joy, you have to kind of acknowledge that for a lot of people, it has been hard to find the joy for the last 18 months. But I think it's really important to find the joy. And everybody has had a different experience of the last 18 months. Me personally and my family, we've had a very difficult 18 months with serious illness. So when I say it's important to find that joy in work, I don't say it glibly. I say it from the perspective of someone who has really had to struggle to find that myself over the last 12 months, certainly. But I will answer the questions in the chat if that's helpful, but I also want to say thank you for having me come in and talk to you today, because today doing this talk is the joy in my day. And I have to say, when my poor mother went to get my first year results in UCD, they were so shocking. She had to ask somebody to explain them to her because they were so bad. It didn't look like anyone else's results. But anyway, so to be here today and talk to all of you, that is absolutely the joy in my day. So thank you very much for having me. And I'm going to answer some of those questions in the chat.
Ciara, we've hit a time boundary, I'm afraid, where we need to move on to our next segment. And the GDPR police would not let your mother in at this day and age to see your results. I'm sorry we have to move on from you, because it was really stimulating, and it kind of touches on an awful lot of questions and issues that we all have at the moment. We'll pull together the chat and circulate it to those that were on the session. Your segment will be up as a video, so people can go back and look at it. And I'm terribly sorry that we're chopping you off, but this is in the world of back-to-back Zoom meetings. Everything comes back-to-back when you don't have to walk between buildings. Ciara, can I thank you very much for your contribution and for how timely it is in terms of the questions we're facing, and sadly move swiftly on to the next element of our conversation, which is our colleagues from IT services talking about the digital office project. Peter and Aidan are going to talk about that, and IT services, as we all know, have been doing sterling work around making all of the hybrid working we've been doing possible. So it's great to get a chance to hear another update from them as they progress through, help us progress through that journey in the hybrid world and the return to campus. So with no further ado, over to Peter and Aidan.
Michael, thanks very much. Just to check, everyone can see my screen there, digital office project slide, yes?
Yep.
Yeah, great. Okay. Thanks very much, Ciara. I found that really interesting. I have to confess, I'm one of the lockdown puppy family, so hybrid working has certainly, I think, kept the puppies very happy. So my name is Peter McKiernan. I'm a project manager in the Enterprise Applications Group in IT Services. I'm joined today by Aidan Kern, one of my colleagues also from EAG. Our presentation ties in very much and it follows on very nicely from Ciara's presentation. We're going to focus on our digital office project and digital transformation in practice, and really how we can facilitate hybrid working. I hope at the end of this session we'll have sparked an interest in how our digital office can improve how you collaborate with colleagues, how you make your digital work environment easier to manage and be more effective. In the digital office, many of our common tasks will remain the same. We will still email as before, but others will require a bit of adjustment in some of the other areas. So how we sign documents, manage files, run brainstorming sessions, use our office phone from home. This can now all be done online. And I like the quotation there from one of the VPs in Gartner: success in a hybrid work environment requires employers to move beyond viewing remote or hybrid environments as a temporary or short-term strategy and to treat it as an opportunity. And I think we can all agree in many respects, productivity has probably gone up during the hybrid working phase. So what does the digital office actually mean? To quote Google, it's an integrated solution with a singular promise: everything you need to get anything done now in one place. And I'd add to that, and to get anything done completely independent of location. So it's about taking location completely out of the picture. And this concept strongly supports our own strategy to implement advanced systems and services, and that's from the team transforming through digital technology from our university strategy. So two of the key principles are, firstly, common tools and approaches for common tasks, and that's kind of a theme throughout our digital office project. And then also, all data and documents will be stored, accessed, processed, and transmitted electronically. And there are two themes from our strategy. And I also very much like this whole concept of collaboration equity. And this is the ability to contribute equally regardless of location, role, experience level, and device level, and device preference, I should say. So that's just like a number of ways the digital office can be described and where it fits in with our own university strategy. So in terms of our own project, what will that actually deliver? What will it actually do? So we divided our digital office into three main themes. The first one is file storage and sharing. So file storage and sharing has now moved almost completely online with hybrid working. And this actually gives us more control and flexibility over how we manage and share our information. For example, you can use a shared drive and folders to organize your team files, grant access only to whom and when it is needed. And we also have a wealth of information now developed on how best to manage your file storage and sharing. And as part of all this project, one of the key parts of this project was to set up a website, and Aidan will showcase that for you in a few moments. And that just highlights all the resources that we have on these common tools. The second area then is collaboration, the second theme. So working online has transformed how we collaborate, really. Meetings via video calls are now part of, we're all very used to video calls as part of our working lives. Signing documents and collaborating on drafts can actually be done more efficiently using our online common tools by cutting down on duplicate versions, lost hard copies, and multiple emails. We're all very familiar with those issues. We can continue this transformation by using our shared tools for areas like instant messaging, discussion forums, workshops, registration forums, and more. And the whole idea, again, is taking the location out of the picture completely. So the third theme, and the one that Aidan's going to just give you a live demo of again in a few moments, just around optimal use of your calendar and how best to use your calendar and get the most out of it. But time management, as we know, particularly hybrid working, is more important than ever. Especially if we have to make time for other responsibilities on days we're working from home, and Ciara outlined some of the issues that come up around that. And it can really help, and we can help do this by keeping our calendars up to date, by letting each other see at a glance when we're free and busy, and when we're working, and by using a team calendar to show our team meetings, events, and absences. And there's ways of doing this very easily with our current calendar tools. And this will help us make better use of time and make planning meetings all the more easier, even in the hybrid environment. So I'm going to hand you over to Aidan in a moment. So with a live demo of some of the calendar features, which I think could make we could make more use of across the university, particularly when we think in terms of using common tools for common tasks. And so Aidan's going to take it through a live demo now on some of the optimal ways to use your calendar, and he's also going to showcase for you our digital office website, where we have a whole wealth of resources on these three different areas that help support hybrid working. So I'll just stop my share now, Aidan, I'll hand over to you.
Great. Thanks, Peter. Morning, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen as well. Just going to show you some practical examples, and just for the GDPR police, that's a sample calendar, it's not my actual calendar. Just going to show you some practical examples, as Peter mentioned, of how we can make the most of using our calendars. And one of the objectives is to free up time and to free up your inbox as well, because a lot of tasks we're currently doing around our calendar might be a bit labor intensive, or we're sending around lots of emails and polls to try and organize meetings. We just want to show you ways of simplifying that and saving time. And also, as Ciara mentioned in her presentation earlier, setting boundaries and keeping time for yourself and managing your work-life balance is very important for us as well. So you can see on my screen just a sample calendar there with various meetings set into it. You might notice at the top I've got settings like home and office. I've got an out of office setting here for this day. There's another yellow calendar here for some reason. That's a school office calendar as well. So if this isn't my calendar, as I said, if someone wanted to meet with me, they could just search for my calendar. They could see it as blocks of busy without showing any details. Again, the GDPR police can stand down. They can see that, yeah, Friday morning looks good for me. If they want to have a meeting with me, they don't need to send me a poll or send me emails. They can just jump straight in and organize a meeting with me like that. Okay, so I'm just going to show you very quickly some of those settings and how you can set them up. All of this information is on our website as well, so you don't need to take a flurry of notes or anything like that. You'll be able to go step by step through all these things in the resources we'll show you in a moment. Really, the first message we want to get across to people is to keep your calendar up to date. That means when you know you're going to be out of the office, or when you know you're taking leave, or you know you have meetings, make sure you put them into your calendar as soon as possible, because otherwise you'll be have more managing to do with other things that come in and people looking to take your time as well. That free and busy setting that I showed you there when you saw my calendar, only blocks of busy, is something we're really encouraging people to do. I'll just show you how to do that. I'm just down near this calendar here. I've got the settings and sharings. I scroll down to access permissions for events, and I have it ticked on. to make my calendar available for University College Dublin with only as free or busy. And as you saw there, people can check your calendar without seeing the details of your calendar. And I know that might be a bit of a culture shift for people who might say, well, why do people want to check what time I'm working and things like that? But the fact is, it makes more sense for us as an organization and as a team that we can see these things and organize our meetings more efficiently as well. So it does save time, it saves meetings. I know I can see some familiar faces here who I know do these things already. I'm sure they can testify to the fact that it cuts down on a lot of the unnecessary extra admin tasks that you have to do just to do your day-to-day job as well. So that's that. You saw here these settings about home and office. Again, a hybrid environment implies that it's a mix of working from home and working from office. If you let people see your calendar is busy, there's also a setting where they can see at a glance if you're working from home or from your office. If I just show you here, just go into your general settings and you can just go into working hours and location. The working hours section, you can set that, which is very useful for a lot of us. If we have responsibilities outside of work, you can set it so that your working hours are on your calendar from say 9 o'clock to 1 on a Wednesday. What that does is that anyone who tries to invite you for a meeting outside of those hours gets a notification saying that's outside your normal working hours, so they can see that that's not a time you'll be available. We can't police the polytest of your colleagues, whether they'll go ahead and invite you or not, but at least they'll see that and they'll be aware of it. The enable working location is what you saw at the top of that calendar. It shows people who have access to see your calendar is free and busy, whether you'll be in the office or whether you'll be working from home, as well as being able to see that. We are, and Mark mentioned at the very start, we may still have more restrictions and guidelines to keep for a time yet, so we might have to manage workplace capacity, who attends on what day as well. So that's a way of seeing at a glance as well who'd be in and out. I know there are some teams already using that setting and they seem to get on very well with it. We mentioned at the start there about keeping your boundaries and making sure you have your own work-life balance and your time for yourself as well. This out-of-office setting in your calendar is a way of blocking off time. Oh, sorry, I'll just go back here. You just click on any part of your calendar, you see an out-of-office here. And you can go ahead and set all the dates either for part of a day or for a whole day. And it also lets you decline new and existing meetings. So if you've already got a meeting arranged for that out of office time, it'll decline it for you. If anyone sends you a meeting request for that day, it'll automatically decline it because you're out of office. So again, this comes back to as well, keeping your calendars up to date. The earlier you can set that in your calendar, you won't have the risk of having to go back to people and say, no, I'm actually out of the office. They'll be able to see straight away. They'll get a message immediately saying that you're out of office from your work. And finally, this setting here, we've set up a shared calendar, a team calendar. Lots of places around the university use it in different ways. In IT services, we have one of these where we enter in days that people are taking on leave, and also team meetings as well, or other team events. And as you can see, you can overlay it on your own personal calendar. So it's a good way of seeing at a glance who's in, who's out, when you have team meetings, when you have other events as well. So those are really some of the settings in your Google Calendar that we can make the most of. And as you can see, it'll cut down on a lot of the back and forth of organizing meetings, of saying when you're available, when you're not available. It may, as I said, be something different for you. But like I said, there's no GDPR worries about showing people that you're busy at a certain time. Again, these are all optional settings, but we encourage teams to take them on. So if you want to go back to your team today and say, why don't we as a team do this? The more teams that do it, the more people across the university will do it, because we're working more and more outside of our silos is the favorite word of everyone when we're having this discussion. So the benefit will be felt across the university, the more people who do it. Peter mentioned we have a digital office website. It's ucd.ie/digital office. And that's it here, where we're bringing together under those three themes that Peter mentioned in his presentation: collaborating, calendaring, and file storing and sharing. The various tips and tricks that we have. I'll just go into the calendaring one that you can see, just have a short preamble. We have just a short video here giving an overview of just the things that Peter and myself have spoken about today. And here we have our resources for doing various different tasks within your calendar, such as how to get started, what I just spoke about there, for example, displaying my calendar as blocks of free and busy, and all these links link to the new IT support hub, the knowledge base articles that we have there, where we set out how exactly to do these things, illustrate them where we can, give step-by-step guides of using all of these tools as well. So we definitely encourage you to browse those articles, make the most of them as well. As you can see, we've got ones on collaborating, where we've got lots of different resources about managing communications, managing a meeting, managing a webinar or online workshop as well. We also have supporting information such as the file storage and sharing guide, along with our colleagues in the GDPR office, that provides some basis and some guidance and reassurance for you for using Google Drive and sharing files and information in this environment as well. And we also have a YouTube channel as well with all of our short clips as well. I agree. I'll just show you our YouTube channel very quickly. I'll switch off the sound. We have playlists such as work on various Google tools, tips and tricks for Zoom, all very short videos as well, Terminal 4 and various other playlists as well for the information that we have. And again, the objective here is to free up your time and to free up your inbox. And you know, we can chip away at these things and do it gradually, but we will get it done hopefully. And you'll see the benefits from these things. So I hope you'll get some ideas from browsing our site. I'll put the link into the chat now in a moment. You'll be able to go and see that. But certainly plenty of things there for you to look at, to go back to your teams, to see how you can implement these things on a team basis, and just make the most of the tools that we already have. And we can see the progress that we have already made in adapting in various processes, and we can continue and we can build on that from going from remote working to hybrid working. Okay, thanks very much. I'll just stop sharing my screen for the moment. I think we do have a little bit of time, do we, Justine, for questions?
Yep, we've got a few minutes there, Aidan, so just check through the chat there.
I've just got a question for Peter and for Aidan. I'm curious as to what you've seen change in terms of the digital office, say since April of last year, to how people are working now, and indeed have you seen a change in the last month? But I know for all of us, the move to remote was a jolt, and IT made that possible. So, but what has evolved in terms of people's behaviour or their use of technology since then? What do you see people finding the best use of, and maybe things that they aren't as conscious of as you might hope? But just tell us the story, if you can, a little bit about what you've seen.
Sure, Aidan, I'll take that as a start. Maybe you can follow in then. But
yeah, sure.
Certainly one of the big areas, Michael, I think, is we found a lot more interest in kind of live collaboration. So you have teams working in different locations. Some of them might be the office, some of them might be at home, and they still have a requirement to work on a document, for example. So it could be a spreadsheet, it could be a Word or a Google Doc, whatever it is. And you know, normally you're able to go down the corridor or get together around a table in a room and you can collaborate on the document. You might put stuff up on a whiteboard or something like that, but you can't really do that with hybrid working. So we found a lot of interest in building now in the whole area around live collaboration, and the kind of suite of applications we're talking about there really facilitate that very well. And I think we did a demo one of the previous Work Smarter events on live collaboration of documents, so that you can work together on the document, you know, in some ways easier than you could sitting around a table working on your laptop. So I think for me that would probably be the kind of standout area that we see more and more interest of as we kind of build awareness of the power of some of these tools that people have ready on the desktops. And I just think, you know, it kind of ties in with the whole area of the common tools for common tasks, that they're there, but I really suspect that people aren't getting the full use of the power that's available there for them.
Yeah.
I can just give you another example if I can very quickly. Previously, I know of a lot of HR colleagues here, contracts sent out to new employees were sent out in the post, took maybe a week or so or longer to come back, get processed as well. Now that's done in a day online. and the benefits that knocks on in terms of getting an employee set up more quickly, getting them IT access more quickly. They're happier starting off, which is a crucial time for giving people a good impression and making the workplace a nice place to be, and maybe even a bit of joy, as Ciara mentioned earlier on. So all these things add up.
That's your document signing solution that you released earlier this year, isn't it?
Yeah.
What's that called?
NitroSign.
NitroSign, absolutely. What about what you've seen? If there's other questions, Josephine or Olga, let me know. But what about what you've seen in terms of people's use of Zoom as an integrated part of day-to-day life? Have you any interesting insights from that pattern? And perhaps you don't, but I know a lot of us spend a lot of time on Zoom.
I think one of the things that Peter mentioned was collaboration as well. And I know that Zoom allows people to work on a single version of a document during a Zoom call, where you can have the document on screen, you can all chip into it and you can see each other's edits, where previously there were multiple versions flying around. You couldn't make changes at the same time if something saved on a Novell drive. Yeah. So it creates its own dynamic in its way, as well as cutting down time, cutting down emails. It does replicate to an extent the idea of working together and brainstorming and putting heads together.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Michael, as well, I think there'll be a big demand and a big change in terms of, like, some people will be in the office, you'll be sharing a meeting, some people will be in the office sitting around a desk, and some people will be at home. And how does that work? You know, it doesn't work if everybody's just working off laptops and you get feedback and everything. But there are new screens, and we have a couple of them in the computer center, and I know some other offices are looking at getting some. So you basically just, they're all in one piece. You have a screen, and it takes the whole issue of some people live in the office and some people been at home out of the picture. You know, this thing picks up everyone in the room. It zooms in on the person who's talking. It encompasses everyone, and I can work with a group of people, and I have done it. You know, 5 people sitting around a desk, and I can partake in the meeting just as if I was there. It's very interesting technology.
That ties in with a really important theme that Ciara brought up in her talk, which is about not creating disadvantage for people who are working from home at a given point in time, that we don't create that kind of two-tier experience. But my sense of things is we're still exploring heavily as to what the way we can get, especially what you've just mentioned there, Peter, that kind of that meeting technology. We're still heavily exploring how that might work. I presume that's an evolving area even as we speak, as to how what's.
Absolutely, Michael. I mean, as I say, we've only got 1 or 2 of those screens fitted. We got it on test originally, and as I say, I know there's interest in some other offices in them as well. But it's a game changer for me for the whole mix of some people at home and some people in the office, which is what's happening now. You know, a few months ago we were all working from home, but over the coming months you'll find some people are back in the offices for projects or whatever, and then some people will still be at home on a given day. And it's a nightmare to try and organize a meeting to get everybody in one location in the current environment anyway. So it just takes that whole thing out of the picture, and for me it's going to be a game changer.
And have you got to the point where you're ready in IT services to share about some of that technology, or I'm sure you do, or I may have missed it, but have you got stories coming out around that, or is it a little bit early for those?
It's probably a little bit early. We're using it. I mean, as I say, they're only starting to be adopted around the university. But I mean, it just ties in with Zoom. It's just it's an additional piece of functionality around Zoom, really.
I'm sure there's a hungry audience for any inspiration as to how we can do those things, because we're all still exploring. And I see a comment in from Iris around the mechanics of open plan offices when people are on Zoom meetings. We even tried it in Agile where there were 2 of us in the same space at the same Zoom meeting, and even with the best of headsets, you couldn't really do that. So there was a lot. I know some schools and some offices have got spare rooms that people book so that they can take part even in the same meeting. So that's a whole evolving area, I think, for all of us tied in with the technology. But you made a good point. I mean, it's a practical point around how Zoom and shared documents in Google can work really well together for a team collaborating. So thank you for that. So you guys are, the digital office isn't built yet. It's as that terrible but true phrase go. It's a work in progress, and more news to be seen soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, it's always going to be a work in progress.
It's always be, and it's there for everybody to use now. So I'd encourage go and have a look. We have a wealth of information off the website now, and just see how the tools are there. It's just about how best to use them across teams and hybrid working, really.
And just on that point, very quickly to finish, someone had a question there: how do we get people to use common tools for common tasks, and the glib answer is to use them.
To use them, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the best way to find out which the best ones are. You can have arguments forever about the best one in theory.
We're not saying one tool for every task. Common tools for common tasks.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, Peter and Aidan, thank you very much for your contribution, and we'll circulate the usual links and keep track of things as ever, but thank you for that. So now I'm going to move on to our third session, which is inviting Aidan Morgan from the UCD Innovation Academy to lead a panel discussion around what the future of work might look like post-COVID. So we're waiting for Aidan to present us, for Alan to present us with the answer. Hopefully he's coming along and telling us exactly how it's going to work, and all we have to do is follow the instructions. It may be more complex than that. I imagine Alan is the program director for the Innovation Academy's creativity and innovation in education, and so Alan's areas of interest are all around innovation in the education space, and we know the Innovation Academy by definition is interested in that kind of inspiration and change. So without mis-selling or underselling Alan any further, what I'll do is hand over to Alan for the next 30 minutes and his panel, and I'll let Alan too, just so that he knows what we're doing, run any Q&A session at the end as well. You'll see the chat going up. So Alan, with no further ado, over to yourself and your guests. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Michael, and good morning, everyone. Great to be here with their Work Smarter Together. I love what you guys do, and always happy to be a part of it. So no pressure there from the introduction to Michael to finish off the session this morning. So we've brought together. We thought we'd bring together a couple of people who have actually worked together in a commercial environment to try to solve and help solve the hybrid work model, and to kind of address that problem in an organizational setting for both the organization leaders and the employees involved. So I'd like to welcome our guests and to sincerely thank them for their time, because I know they're busy people. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Jess Hayden, a former colleague of the Innovation Academy, former program head of program development with the Innovation Academy a number of years ago, and Jess has gone on to do weird and wonderful things. And at the moment, Jess runs the Brave Lab, and this is all about an organization that realizes a world where people and planet can thrive together. And the mission is to put people and the planet ahead of profits, guiding organizations and their people to be braver. And from beautiful Kinvara in Galway, but based now in Berlin and dialing in from Berlin, you're very welcome, Ruth McMahon, is the Employee Experience Manager at SoundCloud. And I'm sure most of us are aware of SoundCloud, but just in case, to keep it nice and official, SoundCloud originally, as you know, a Swedish-based organization, or founded in Sweden, online audio distribution platform and music sharing website, now based in Berlin, henceforth why Ruth is in Berlin. And it's obviously one of those platforms that enables users to upload, promote, and share music and digital processing around streaming audio and that kind of whole area of music sharing. So Jess and Ruth have recently worked together, and I'd like to start off this conversation by saying, and maybe to tie everything we've heard this morning, and it was great to hear from Ciara. Great to hear from a graduate of the Innovation Academy and who's doing so well. And I thought it was poignant, the fact that Ciara talked about she didn't miss the M50. And this morning, when I was preparing for this interview, or fireside chat, as we prefer to call it in the Innovation Academy, I was listening to Morning Ireland, the national radio program, and they were broadcasting from different places around the country and talking about the changes from the pandemic and the impact of the changes that's going to happen maybe from Friday onwards, and the whole concept of hybrid working and where it's going to and where it's come from. But I was saddened to hear about the traffic reports and how people are still stuck in traffic. For those of you maybe not living in Dublin, it was a particularly wet and horrible late October autumnal morning this morning, so a typical heavy traffic morning. So I would maybe start off by saying, what have we learned from the pandemic? we seem to be still at this juncture where we don't know if we're going to work or coming to work or working from home or hybrid working. And I think a lot of the talks this morning have talked about that. So maybe just to platform this, to headline it and say, how is your business navigating the future of work? And I'd like to go to Jess maybe first and say, Jess, in relation to organizational change, you've worked with many organizations, including SoundCloud in more recent times. But how are organizations going to navigate this new road, particularly for the individual versus the organizational needs? And then how do we have that? How do you have that hybrid conversation with employees and leaders alike?
Yeah, thanks, Alan. I think, well, to kind of, you know, go with your first question, what have we learned? I think we've learned something really interesting about the psychological contract that we have with our organization. So all that stuff that isn't written down, this assumption we all had that we can't do the thing we need to do unless we're co-located. We're all in the same place at the same time. That's now in flux. That assumption has not been validated. We know that lots of organizations can now carry out their core work with people all over the world. I've been running my business completely remotely for more than 5 years. So now we're going to question everything, right? And if we think, well, what other assumptions have we been making that maybe wouldn't get validated if we had the chance to really question them? And I think that all this stuff is going to be in flux. And I think people will be right to question it, because this is how we'll progress to the organization in the future that we need to be. How do you do that though? How do you balance all this stuff in flux? The world is also changing. There are huge priorities out there that organizations, research we did recently would show, aren't necessarily prioritizing as much as they should be. Like response to the climate crisis, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging and accessibility. These are all things that people want change in, but the action isn't happening as fast or as responsive enough as people want. So how do you square that? We use user-centered design, and this is something that like I would have gotten my head around during my time in the Innovation Academy. But I personally saw like, wow, there are so many applications for this in the world of work in organizations, because what we're able to do with that user-centered design process is say, here are all of the needs, all of them out there that are currently going unmet. Now, what can we do to find a way to address most or sometimes even all of these needs? So we get all the individual needs, because we know the lives of our employees are changing second by second. The world is changing, and the organizational focus, the mission is going to change as well. So we put all of that stuff down and say, okay, what novel ways can we do to approach this that actually meets the needs, because they're changing, as you know, all the time. So I think that's the approach that we took when we worked with SoundCloud. And other clients as well. The first thing we do is we look to wonderful people like yourselves, people in universities who've thought about this stuff in the organizational labs, and have published fabulous evidence and research that we look to and we use. And it was super clear, like that, you know, it's not going to be possible to go back to former ways of working. The status quo is eroded now. We have to create something new. So that was kind of our guiding light in this.
Before I go to Ruth, thanks, Jess. Before I come to you, Ruth, I think it's interesting this morning looking at all the different backgrounds we have, and you know, we started off on Zoom 2 years ago when the first lockdown happened, and we're all using fancy backgrounds and pictures of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco and beautiful rivers flowing behind us, and now everyone is happy to show their houses,
yes.
Happy to show their rooms, and happy to show their maybe their home office. You know, do you think, Ruth, that psychological change, and Ciara talked about this safe psychological space earlier this morning, that psychological change where actually it's okay to show off my if you like, my personal background? I think that's a huge change in people's mindset.
Yeah, definitely. I think just a result of, hopefully I had a conscious effort to normalize this thing and make it very normal for us to be in these once very private environments with, yes, cats floating around our tables, our kids everywhere. Like that was one thing we put a big focus on at the very beginning, was really encouraging camera on, like even people who didn't even want to have their camera on in this place. And just speaking about, I suppose, that we're all in the same situation, and that making sure like the whole humanity, like the human element of this weird situation was at the core. So yeah, happy to get to see more people's.
Yeah, and I think the human-centered design that Jess speaks about, and that whole concept of, you know, looking at things in maybe a design thinking framework or through a design thinking lens, I think is hugely important. And I think organizations like SoundCloud and other organizations that Jess has worked with have that concept of the user is the most important, driven by the customer experience, driven by the employees. So maybe on that note, Ruth, maybe just talk to us, and Jess, please feel free to jump in here to support Ruth in relation to what you've done together. What supports have you put in place in SoundCloud to enable this new way of working?
Yeah, so just go back to the beginning. I think it was towards the end of 2020, I suppose, after we kind of somewhat settled into a very reactive period, that initial move to work from home and figuring things out on the go. We made a decision, like or a recognition in the company that this new way of working was here and was here to stay. And that was something that we had to embrace and keep up with if we wanted to like best serve our employees and our business.
And was that a difficult acceptance at the first instance, Ruth?
I don't think so. I think it's got to be innovative and keeping up with what's going on in the world around us is kind of what we do as a business also. Like our mission is to lead what's next in music. So to lead what's next in working kind of aligned nicely with that also. Maybe there's a few people who had to get on board, but overall it was pretty positive. But yeah, we just wanted to make sure we were doing design something purposeful, innovative, and most importantly, as Jess can describe more, that was tailor fit for our unique, diverse body of employees, and aligned with our business goals, of course. So that's why what Jess presented us with, or her kind of approach to design, spoke to us as a project team. Jess, I don't know if you want to jump in.
It was super clear when we worked with SoundCloud. SoundCloud are unique. All organizations are unique because all the people in them are unique. But SoundCloud have this really interesting position between the music industry and the tech industry. And so when we kind of looked at that, we realized it's not going to suit this organization to go fully remote, because they do need to form that connection. And we still need, as the previous speakers were talking about, we still need that physical space together, that co-located time to do, creative stuff, collaborative stuff. It's so hard for technology to support us to do that in any way that's going to be like the real life effort. And SoundCloud is full of artists, full of creators. That's what they do. They build a bridge between creators and technology. So that we knew that had to be part of the solution for the company as a whole. And we only found that out by really looking at what are the needs and talking to people and doing the research. And I think this, Alan, from design thinking, you spend most of your time thinking about the problem, and not that much time generating solutions, right? You kind of front load to empathy and what's going on for people, what exactly is changing, what are the needs now. A few things that kind of stick out and related to your comments around commute, like we spoke to people in our research for other clients and for we've done loads of research on this topic. We've spoken to people that would be in the air 4 times a month on transatlantic flights, and we kind of did the calculations and realized they're spending more time traveling transatlantically than they are with their families or in the location they're traveling to or from for work. And that's just, that realization that we can still do the work, but we don't have to do that anymore. People were just unwilling to accept going back to that kind of life. And the other side, we had another insight, which was some people love the alone time they get in the air and are unwilling to give that up. But instead of saying, okay, right, we're just going to have to go back to air travel, design thinking would say to us, no, is there another way we can fulfill that need for alone time? Yeah. Is there another way we can fulfill that need for the status I get by being a business class flyer?
And can I just maybe just address that point, Jess, and Ruth as well? So in the design thinking framework, we start off with empathy and looking at the user, like focusing on talking to the user, what they want, to try and understand the next stage of the design thinking process, which is problem definition. So maybe just to ask you, Jess or Ruth, I don't mind, you can answer together. What was the problem definition? What was the ultimate problem that jumped out from the empathy stage that you undertook?
I think there was like 30, wasn't there?
There's quite a few. Yeah.
And do you think, like, you know, one of the things that I spoke recently to a CEO of a huge organization in Ireland that we do a bit of work with in the academy. He does some work with our students and so on. And he said to me, one of the things I've learned from the pandemic is I'll never drive 2 hours for a 20-minute meeting. He said, it's just a waste of my time. It's a waste of my organization's time. And it's, you know, and so on. So there's a lot of different learning. So of those 30 problems, so the point or the question I want to ask is, like, has the pandemic, you know, fundamentally changed work practice? And would these problems have arisen otherwise? Or been discovered, sorry.
I have a response to that. And I think, Ruthie, I think you can maybe add to it as well. But I think the thing we ended up actioning out of all of the things, because I mean, that's what you do, right? Surface all the problems and then try and figure out a way to address them. But the two main things we ended up actioning was just being more explicit about how we should do stuff and what it was. What is the thing now? What is the model? Because you know, loads of organizations were reactive and hadn't come out with a line saying, this is now what we're doing, this is how we're going to set up, and here are the rules. So that's what we did, was just make it explicit. Here's the model. This is what we're going to do going forward. Give people as much commitment as you could in a situation that's in flux, but then set up the rules of engagement. So we worked with SoundCloud to develop a virtual working playbook, and that again, using the kind of best practice, the stuff that already existed pre-pandemic about how you should do this stuff. Loads of resources out there, put it all together in a tailored way. And maybe Ruth, you can talk about, like, has that worked? How's that been going down?
Yeah, that's been brilliant. That's what kind of jumped into my mind as well. One of the biggest challenges was that everyone had kind of been forced into a new work situation, and we'd not really spent that much time talking about standardizing that way of working. What are the protocols and the way you kind of naturally navigate when you come into an office and you see people doing things. That gets lost, obviously, the remote setup. So we built this playbook with Jess that touched on the tools that we use, how do we use them, what's our very, like, really basic stuff about how we have a meeting, you know, and how do we communicate and why do we communicate. And also we had a section that focused on well-being, of course, like as a manager, what can you be doing to ensure that your team, even though they're not in the same room as you, are not suffering.
Would you say, Ruth, that sorry for interrupting you. Would you say that, I mean, you know, well-being is a term, you know, I hear a lot recently, and we do a lot of well-being. You know, there's a lot of well-being aspects to a number of our programs in the academy, and it's something we really feel that has surfaced as an important element in work and education during lockdown and the pandemic. Maybe just talk to us a little bit more about that whole well-being, and maybe the structure of the new office. You know, and I don't mean physical, but that kind of cultural structure of the new office.
Yeah, I think during the pandemic, like in so many different worlds, work and personal, like, well-being became huge, like priority number one, like priority for certainly for SoundCloud, for employees. Again, I think the first thing you can do is being explicit and having conversations and empowering people managers to be able to have conversations with employees that are empathy driven also. And well, funny you mentioned our office design. We actually did a lot of work on our physical office design to facilitate more say well-being and opportunities for people to connect in person and to make sure their time in the office was very fruitful for, like, fulfilling that what they were lacking, like in terms of social connection. We also have a lot of kind of wellness spaces in the new office, and yeah, I think both in the way I'm thinking about it, also in a remote work.
And do you think like that whole new structural design has that been part of the enabling or the new enabling cultural change, or was part of that there before, Ruth?
100%. Well, we've always, like, our offices were always really like important to us, and we do have a really strong and dynamic and fun office culture. But one of the huge outcomes from the work with Jess was rethinking the purpose of that office. And yeah, I think there was two big kind of actions that came from work. One was the playbook that we mentioned, but also the other was repositioning our offices as hubs. So now we think of our 4 offices as hubs of social connectivity, in-person collaboration, and connection to our industry as well. Being able to use them as a space that bring in the music industry into our offices and offer our employees an opportunity to connect with that too. And yeah, we've kind of brought in a whole new variety of how you can work in the office. Like, we used to just, like any office, just have very standard individual desks. We've got some individual desks, it's all flex desking, hot desking now. We have a lot more project rooms, desks that teams can book on the fly, more whiteboards, more individual meeting rooms. And this is all outcomes from the shift in the way we work and the work.
Okay, wow, sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I know there's a number of questions in the chat box, and I might just refer to Josephine to help me with those in a few minutes before we finish up. Great, thanks, Josephine. And then, we've about 10 minutes left, so I have a few more questions, and then we'll finish off with some Q&A, guys, if that's okay with you. I suppose one of the things that struck me in this whole journey, let's call it, and is anxiety. And Ciara mentioned it, and I think the guys from IT maybe have alluded to as well. So a lot of people have this kind of anxiety about going back to the office, this anxiety about going back, traveling to work, down the M50 or whatever your road is of travel. So how this is for either of you, how can an organization create that inclusive environment in the hybrid model where people are welcome? If they need to work from home, they work from home, and so on, or that hybrid model of working. I think the word working from home probably will change. So how can they create that environment that lessens anxiety?
I think it comes back to boundaries and having healthy boundaries. And like what we saw with the pandemic and the overnight shift to online was what you kind of mentioned at the beginning, was like that private boundary dissolved suddenly, and some people were okay with it, some people were really sensitive about it, and it was quite exposing for a lot of people. We're now in a different phase of this boundary recreation, right, where employers who have the power in the relationship are saying, come on back in, it's grand. But what people perceive to be safe and fine and okay for them is very, very different, and it totally depends on who's in your family network. If you've got somebody that's not able to be vaccinated and is particularly vulnerable to the virus, going into an office probably now seems like a really, really dangerous thing to do, probably for somebody that you might really love. So I think we really have to exercise autonomy here, give people autonomy, let them design what's safe for them, and work and listen, like just really listen to the needs. I think employers have to get used to adapting to the needs of their employees, and some are really good at this, some are not. But at the end of the day, right, you force somebody to come to an office who's highly anxious, they're not going to do good work. They're not going to do good work. So why would you want that? That's my 2 cents anyway.
Great, thanks, Jess. Ruth, did you want to add anything to that?
No, just echo it. I think the important thing is just recognizing the diversity of people that you have in your organization and designing for the diverse groups. And obviously there's no one size fits all for anything. It's people related.
No. And I think that kind of gives a nice segue into my kind of last couple of questions. I've always been impressed with, leadership in organizations like SoundCloud and maybe some of our, some of the other larger, tech companies around the world, and they always kind of promote themselves as having the really cool leaders. And I think you know, that's important, but sometimes it's lip service as well. This is maybe, you know, a bit of a loaded question maybe for both of you, but what is the role, or what are the role of leaders in making this hybrid model a success? Because I think the whole concept of emotional leadership, emotional intelligence leadership, is becoming so much more important now as we come out of this pandemic, hopefully. So what is the role of leaders in your organization or other organizations to make this hybrid model a success? Jess?
The evidence on this one is really clear, right? And there's lots of stuff in psychology where the evidence doesn't help as much, but this one's really, really clear. Leaders need to set the tone. They need to set a cultural tone, and they need to follow with their actions. Actions have to follow words in this space. So I've seen examples in lots of organizations where, yes, okay, we will still support you to work from home, but the leadership team have decided to hire a hotel room and we're coming together every week and thrashing through stuff, and you're not there. That's not leadership, right? If you really want to be inclusive, you have to model it. I think that's the kind of the first thing. It's also, though, and I think this is kind of like the most key thing is like, it's adaptation, right? You've got to be okay with adapting. You've got to be okay as well with sometimes not getting it right and owning it and saying, didn't get that one right, we're going to change it. That's leadership.
Yeah.
Saying like, no, let's press on.
Maybe embracing failure, to understand that we can learn from failure.
Exactly. But like, you know, it's pressing on with the status quo is just, your company won't survive, I think is the bottom line.
Thanks, Jess. And Ruth, you know, I mean, I know you want to keep the boss happy in SoundCloud, but maybe just give us a quick, you know, overview of the leadership in SoundCloud. Have they given an inclusive, I think what you told us already they have, but maybe just talk to us a little bit more about that concept of how they're making this hybrid model a success.
Yeah, I think as Jess described, they had to be role models from day one. And actually in the research that we did, I think one of the challenges we came up against, that there was a perception in our workplace that people could be drawn into the office, you know, without enough notice and not in the way that felt good for them. I don't think it was necessarily a founded perception, but it was one that existed because leaders hadn't, I suppose, explicitly spoken about their support of our design project and of Connection First, our working model. So we had buy-in from the first day and keeping them involved in the conversations all along, like every update they were involved in, and kind of giving green light at each stage, and making sure that they're the ambassadors for the influence of the whole company.
Yeah, I think that ambassadorial role is very important. And somebody in the chat box there, I think it was James, said about trust, that whole concept of trust, to understand that relationship between organizations and their employees. So good point, James, and thanks for that. Okay, I'm going to finish up. We're just hitting the time, and then I'll just pass over to Josephine to get some questions, because I haven't been looking at the chat box, I must admit. And I'm going to just kind of maybe, you know, throw a hand grenade question at you to finish up. You know, Ruth, you work in a global organization that has multiple millions of customers, and Jess, you have great experience in this space of innovation, creativity, and enabling organizations, and you've worked with other global partners, I know, as well as SoundCloud. So I'll just head to maybe Ruth first, and then finish up with Jess. Ruth, what is next in the future of work? And you can answer that from a SoundCloud perspective if you want.
Okay. Yeah, I think hybrid is here, and I think it's here to stay. And I think flexibility is only going to become more important. And I think working models that are built on flexibility and trust, like leaders trusting employees, are the ones that will be most successful.
Thanks, Ruth. Jess, what is the future? What is next in the future of work?
I completely agree with Ruth, and actually, Luke, we have a pretty solid point of view on this at the Brave Lab. We think there's 3 core skills that organizations need to start embedding now. We think that this working model challenge is small small business compared to what's coming down the line with regards to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging and accessibility and the climate crisis, right? So it's adapt to survive. So get adaptation skills embedded in your organization. As Ruth said, hybrid's not going nowhere. Invest in virtual technology and facilitation skills. Like it's a very different thing to help people reach consensus online than it is in a room and make decisions, do planning, all that kind of stuff. So we think investing in kind of those skills, investing in adaptation and making sure that every role in your organization knows they have responsibility on these key changes that are going to affect every organization on the planet, which is climate and creating equity for all in our organizations. It is coming down the line, and you know it's adapt to survive for organizations, and that's what I think the future work is.
Wow, thanks. Challenging times ahead then, Jess. So that's an interesting point to leave it on. So I just might go over to, sorry, Michael, do you want to jump in there? Yeah?
I'm going to come in on that point of time. We've hit our promised 12:30 boundary, and time etiquette is something that we've all learned in Zoom, is if you can do it, keep to it. So I'm sorry for cutting you off, like I cut Ciara off and like our colleagues from IT got cut off, but what we hoped for this morning and what you've done between you is provide multiple interesting perspectives. Ciara raised a whole bunch of questions at the start. You guys have looked at how people have addressed those questions in SoundCloud and the kind of support, the kind of thinking you used in doing it. And our colleagues in IT services anchored us in the practical reality of day-to-day doing. So our hope this morning was to provide a number of perspectives, and I think we did that. And just so at final thank yous to Alan and to Jess and to Ruth for your section, and for Ciara for her contributions at the start, and for Aidan and for Peter. But probably the most important thank you I need to do is for Josephine and Agile, who was at the heart of organising all of this. So thank you to Josephine and my colleagues there, and to Mark Rogers for opening the session. So once again, folks, Work Smarter Together is about celebrating collaboration and creativity and being there for one another. And we'll see you again sometime soon. Take care and goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks to everyone. Thank you now.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. I haven't